Welcome to FreedomCast, a podcast dedicated to interviewing star icons and entrepreneurs who have encouraged others to become more healthy and active. My name is Ashton, and it's my pleasure to host you as we take another trip through the fitness industry. It's entertaining and informative, and I hope it makes fitness more exciting and special to you in your own fitness journey. FreedomCast is supported by Freedom Fitness Equipment in Charlotte, North Carolina. Freedom Fitness Equipment serves the health and fitness community nationwide, from free weights and strength equipment for home gyms and studios to cardio and conditioning equipment for commercial spaces. Check them out at freedomfitnessequipment.com. Let's get rolling with today's show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to FreedomCast. We're here with Jeremy from Treadstone Defensive Tactics here in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's got a fantastic facility, which I'll let him introduce here in a second, but he's been doing defensive training for about 5 years now, and he was recommended to me through one of my relatives, actually, who's done some training with him before. So welcome to the podcast, Jeremy. Appreciate you having you on.
Thank you.
Can you give us a little bit of background on not only what you're doing at this facility, but also just how you got into defensive tactics training to begin with?
Yeah, so I've been teaching people now for 13 years. I got started off just as doing it as a hobby back in California, and realized it was more fun than my day job. So I asked my instructor, how can I do this? He said, go open a school for me. So I went to San Francisco, opened a school, ran that for 5 years, and then we moved here 5 years ago and opened my own place.
So you were working for somebody before in California that was doing the same thing?
That's correct.
Okay.
Similar things.
Gotcha.
So our specialty is Krav Maga, fitness, and firearms. Out there, it was just fitness and Krav Maga, not really the firearms. And so I came up with a program called the Dynamic Engagements, which is a combination of the firearms with the Krav Maga. And yeah, that's what we focus more on here.
Yeah. I imagine they're a little bit more gun-friendly here, too, in North Carolina.
Definitely.
I love it. What got you into that kind of training in the first place? I'm sure you didn't maybe you woke up one day and said, that sounds cool, but.
Yes, I've always been interested. My background, I'm actually from Ecuador.
Oh, no way.
So I'm a missionary kid. My dream was to be a SEAL.
Okay.
And so I came to the U.S. on a soccer scholarship, started working with a dive motivator to go to BUD/S. But while I was training for that, playing soccer, I ended up severing my ACL and destroying both ankles. So they basically said, you won't probably make it with those injuries. And so I just started pursuing other stuff. I got into flexible packaging and international business. And through that, I was looking for something to do that would be active. And that's how I came across Krav and started doing it just for fun. Nice. So.
Why Krav specifically? Because I know there's a ton of there's a bunch of different defensive methods, and of course people know about Taekwondo and Karate, but Krav is, I think, becoming a little bit more popular as of late. I've heard more about it, but why Krav specifically?
Yeah, so I wasn't actually looking for Krav specifically. Okay. One of my relatives recommended Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, mind you, I had just come off of a year of rehab from knee surgery. And I went in and tried a jiu-jitsu class, and it wasn't for me at that time. Yeah. And I happened to see that the place that offered the jiu-jitsu had an Israeli guy there teaching Krav. Okay. And the only reason I knew what that was I had seen the History Channel had done a series of 2 Americans traveling the world doing different martial arts. And in that series, they went to Israel and did something on Krav. So that was the only reason I had even heard of it, was because of a TV show. So I went and tried that, and it was much more fitting for what I was looking for. I love the realism of it, the practicality. We don't like to consider ourselves a martial art. It is self-defense. Yeah. So that's kind of how I ended up getting into it.
Okay, gotcha. And Krav is specifically built for the Israeli military, is that right? Like specifically for military training and that kind of thing? And
yeah, so originally that's what it was. So they needed a system when Israel became a state. The IDF needed a system that they were going to teach to their soldiers. Okay. And so they came up with Krav Maga. It was taking experiences from the founders, but also looking at other systems and just taking anything that they felt was relevant and could be taught in a quick or short amount of time. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that they equate all Krav Maga with the military Krav Maga. Yeah. There's actually 4 branches of Krav Maga. Oh. So you have the civilian Krav, you have the military, you have law enforcement, and you have the bodyguards. Oh. Each one of those demographics has a different end goal and a different set of means of things that they have that they can use. Yeah. So even though there is a lot of similarity between those different branches, they all have some uniqueness to it. And so what you, as a civilian, you don't want to be learning military Krav Maga, even though some will use that as a marketing thing. But the reality is military Krav is designed for the military and for their specific mission sets. Okay. And so, but most people don't know that.
Okay, interesting. And so what's taught here is civilian Krav Maga, I would assume.
For the civilians, yes.
Okay.
So for law enforcement students, we can teach the law enforcement stuff. For the military, we can do military stuff.
Nice.
But for the bulk of the members that come, they're just your average person that wants to learn to defend themselves and get in shape.
Sure.
And so that's why they come.
So why wouldn't a civilian want to learn military Krav Maga then?
So one, you're not supposed to kill people. Right. unless the circumstance dictates that that's the only way that you're going to survive. We really don't want to take people's lives. Even if I'm justified to do it, we don't want to. So as much as we can, we want to learn things that won't lead to that. Second, understand for the military, most of the training is done with a weapon in their hand, and it's done in the context that you already have another teammate with you. Okay. So in civilian, you don't really have that luxury. Now, maybe a husband and wife or best friends come and train together, so they might stand a chance of having a teammate with them when they have to fight. Yep. But it's just a different environment, so therefore it needs different stuff. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that answers it for you.
I think it does, yeah. And then so with bodyguards, you're the goal there, keeping whatever threat away from whatever you're guarding. So
yeah, so for bodyguards, it's not self-defense because it's defending somebody else. Right. And it goes into a lot of the tactics and things that bodyguards need. Okay. Whereas the civilian Krav has, so like I said, there is crossover. Yeah. So there are elements in the civilian Krav where we teach bodyguard or VIP, third-party protection stuff, because that is like a husband protecting his wife or a wife protecting her husband, sure. Right, or their kids. So there are things that are relevant, but let's take that analogy. Let's say a husband trying to protect his family. He's not being paid to carry a gun and to take them into a limousine. He doesn't need to know formations. He doesn't need to know those kinds of stuff. He just needs to know, how do I, manipulate my family members?
A little closer.
How do I manipulate my family members physically to move them out of the way or to get myself in between them and the adversary? Okay. So you are going to find those different elements in the civilian. It's just not the full curriculum of each of those.
That makes sense. My understanding of Krav too, just stylistically, is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's more brutal tactically than some of the other martial arts disciplines. Like the force used is a lot heavier than, say, I don't know, any other martial arts sport.
It tends to look that way.
Okay.
If you take an actual fight, an encounter, yeah. One, you have to understand that it's going to be violent and fast. Mm-hmm. And most of our people are not the next UFC fighter. Yeah. So they don't have the stature, they don't have the muscles, they don't have the years of training. So they have to find ways that maybe level the playing field a little bit better than what some people would perceive as a less violent system. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, a person that wants to kill you, that's what they want to do, and it's going to take more than just being nice to them to actually finish it. So it does get a lot of press that way. People do seem to think that it is more violent. Our goal is to use the least amount of force necessary to accomplish the mission. Yeah. The founder, Emi, one of his famous quotes, and I'm going to say the words wrong, but the gist of it is that we learn Krav so that one may walk in peace. And the idea was, don't ever fight. Don't get into fights. Try to avoid as much as you can. But if you're ambushed, if you're put in that place, here's a few ways of how to try to fight your way out of it. Sure. So it does get that rap of being brutal. Yeah. It does come across that way. Also, if you look at just the nature of where it came from, Another thing that people don't seem to understand with Israel is it's a really tiny country. So for a fighter jet, when it hits the border, let's say going widthwise, I believe it's in 3 minutes it'll cross the whole country.
Oh, jeez.
So now if you imagine them having to immobilize when any forces come to the border, it's about speed and just you don't have time to sit back and try to find a nice way. Yeah. So if you take all of that history and all the dealings with terrorism, you see that the culture itself is a little bit more not PC, a little more brutal in it because that's what they're faced with. Yeah. And so that got translated into the system as well, whereas it's not how do I dance around the problem. It's, well, if this is the problem, let's take care of it. Yeah. But again, we're not trying to train killers. Yeah. We're trying to train people to be able to go home safely.
Right. That makes total sense. From personal experience, have you had any, I am curious, like, was there any personal impetus for getting into Krav? Like, was your family threatened? Were you personally threatened? And you said, I need to find a way to defend myself. Was there any of that leading up to this?
Not really. Okay. I'm a pretty big guy. And especially in Ecuador, I was much larger than most of my friends. Gotcha. I always had a passion for fighting. Mm-hmm. I just loved it. Yeah. And it kind of seemed to fit with my desire to go into the military. Yeah. I didn't necessarily feel, doesn't mean I haven't been in situations. Right. Growing up, we had lots of riots. I've been in lots of tear gas. I've heard lots of machine gun fire, shotgun fire. That's not new to me, but it wasn't people going after me. Yeah. It was just civil unrest, and you're just happened to be around that area. Mm-hmm. So no, I haven't felt like I needed to learn it to defend myself, per se. Yeah. It is definitely, now that I've done it, I'm glad, right. And to defend my family. But it wasn't like I was robbed and that led me to go to Krav. Right. It was just, it sounded like something fun to do.
Sure. That's fair. If somebody wants to learn Krav, is it the kind of thing that really needs professional instruction, or is that something that, I don't know, you could pick up on YouTube and do decently well at?
All right, so I'm going to be biased here.
Yeah.
I'm going to say the best way to learn is going to have somebody that can actually guide you through it. Sure. That doesn't mean you can't use online resources as a supplemental or they can help you. But I find that with almost anything physical, if you try to just learn it yourself, watching a video, you might get good at like the basic part of it, but you're probably going to miss something. Okay. Definitely helps, but I would definitely steer people towards trying to find somebody that could help them. And it doesn't have to be Krav. So one of the things that we want to be as a company is that we're very open. And if you're not near here and if you can't train with us, but you can go train jiu-jitsu, go train jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be Krav. If you have a Muay Thai school, go train Muay Thai. Mm-hmm. The idea is live a healthier life and a safer life. Yeah. And the nice thing is when we do those two things, our confidence goes through the roof. Mm-hmm. And I know it's kind of cliche. People are like, oh, we put our kids in Taekwondo so that they get confidence. But as adults, we tend to go through life a lot not having that confidence. Mm-hmm. And the healthier we are, so therefore the fitness, right? And the more that we are able to protect ourselves, the easier it is for our brains to have the confidence of, hey, I can enjoy this. I don't have to be fearful of what's going on. Plus, you just feel better because you're healthy. Oh, yeah. So the fitness side of learning to fight is one of the big benefits that's hidden. Mm-hmm. Because you're not just lifting weights. You're having fun learning to punch something and to kick something or to wrestle something. So you're getting a practical skill, but at the same time, you're getting fitness. Yeah. Now, we have fitness-specific classes, right, because you can only go so far in a fighting scenario to learn fitness. But that is one of the things that I did love was because I wasn't the kind of guy that liked to go to the gym. Mm-hmm. And so I've spent most of my life training, but not because I loved it. Yeah. So as a soccer player, I had to train. Yeah. It didn't mean I loved running, but I would run every single day. Mm-hmm. When I was training to go to Buds, I was doing 500 push-ups a day. Wow. So, but again, it wasn't that I loved going to the gym per se just to bulk up. It was, I want to do this goal, and it requires me to do this to get there, so I was willing to do it. Yeah. But when I started doing Krav, I just loved it that you were getting in shape cardio-wise more so than muscle mass because you're not using the weights. Mm-hmm. but you didn't realize it. You were having fun.
Yeah.
So I know some people love working out, so I'm not trying to say it's not fun to work out, but that's me.
Yeah.
So
It's much more fun doing something that you don't even realize you're getting in shape, and like doing something you actually absolutely enjoy like that. That makes, I feel that. How have you seen people's, you talked about confidence, and getting that early on especially is important, especially, and I noticed this with adults. Like, how is Krav, or have you noticed Krav changing people's mindsets and confidence from a personal standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. You can see it in people's, their actions or their demeanor, but we often do get clients or people that come and say, hey, I never would have done this, and now look, I'm doing it.
Wow.
One of the examples from my personal life, not me personally, but one of my students. If you're listening, sorry, Samuel. No. He was the youngest client that I ever took. He was 8 years old. I don't like to teach kids.
Oh, wow.
So normally I either delegate that to somebody else, or I just don't offer a kids program. But he was 8 years old, and I trained him until his bar mitzvah, until I left California and moved out here. And that was a struggle for me, because I felt like I was babysitting more than actually training. And every time I would get so close to writing the email to his parents saying, you know what, I don't think you should spend your money doing this because I'm not seeing a benefit. And before I could ever send an email, I'd always get either a phone call, a text, or an email from his parents saying, hey, his teachers wrote us saying he's doing this now, and he would have never talked to this person, or he's now doing this, and it's all because of what you're doing with him. And it was just amazing that I didn't see it, right? As the teacher, as the person there, I didn't see the difference in his life, but it was very clear to his actual teachers at school and to his parents that what he was doing was having an impact somewhere else. Yeah. So even though that's the kid example, not the adult example, it shows that even if I don't see it, doesn't mean it isn't happening. And we do get lots of people telling us how much it's helped them.
Wow. At 8 years old, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's impressive. You talked about a little bit before too about the just the cardio and conditioning aspects, of the physical aspect of the training. How important is it to be well conditioned going into the training, or do you kind of just pick that up naturally just doing Krav?
Yeah, so we cater to people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
So therefore, you don't have to have any level of fitness to start. Yeah. It will be harder, but I think it's interesting when I have people come in to try a class and they say, oh, well, I need to go away and get in shape before I keep doing this. Yeah. Like, well, the point was to come here and get in shape while doing it. So it's not that people never feel like it's too intense, but realistically, you don't need it. And the thing for us is, and this should be the same with most schools, and that is, we know that you're coming from, a different point in life as somebody else. Yeah. So I don't expect you to be doing, if I have a triathlete with me, I don't expect you to do the same amount of push-ups or the same amount of cardio. But you do as much as you can and progress and make yourself better. And that takes taking that first step and just sticking with it. Yep. I really think the people who say, well, I need to go get in shape, I don't think they're ever going to do it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. That's fair. And then and Krav is built for people of all shapes and sizes. It doesn't take like somebody who's gigantic, or like it's not cut out for somebody who's small, right? I mean, it's pretty much anybody can do it at any time, right?
So that's what we work towards. Now, we have to be honest. Size does play a role. Yeah. Just like athleticism plays a role. Yeah. So it's not that a small person can't beat a big guy. Mm-hmm. It's not that a big guy can't beat a small person. It really is an individual thing. But if we look at fighting in specific scenarios, so let's say choking, somebody's choking you. Well, if we have 10 ways to get out of a choke, well, you want to look and say, okay, well, of those 10 methods out there in the world, I'm just making a fictitious number. Sure. Well, which one applies to the largest demographic? Yeah. And then that's the one you want to take and train people, because it applies to the most. Now, when you have individuals that have extreme difference, so let's say I have somebody that's really tiny and there's a move that works for them but wouldn't work for a big guy, well, you teach them it. Or the vice versa. If I have moves that work for a big guy but wouldn't work for the small guy, it doesn't mean the big guy can't learn it. It just means the standard curriculum is going to be techniques that worked for the largest demographic.
Yeah.
Inside of there will be tweaks or things that we can change that will work more specifically to that individual.
Okay, gotcha. From a fight or flight standpoint, I mean, what's more important in an actual danger situation? So somebody's, in this particular scenario, somebody is coming into your house, you're at the hand-to-hand combat phase. Is it more important that you be conditioned, that you be strong, you have good tech? I mean, obviously all of those are important, but is it, I've heard, especially like with defensive shooting, it's important to just have that muscle memory from shooting over and over and over again, which is essentially a technique thing more than anything else, and just having that there. So what, but from a Krav standpoint, like especially hand-to-hand, what's more important in that scenario?
I would say none of the above.
Oh, really? Okay.
The mindset, the aggression is going to be the biggest. Okay. That will to survive. Okay. We've seen plenty of cases where untrained people just had such grit and determination that they were going to survive a fight. Didn't matter if they got stabbed or shot, and they still not win, but they live.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. We've seen great martial artists get into real fights and lose. And you're like, well, you had all the technique and you lost. But it's a mental thing.
Yeah.
Now, like you did allude to, it'd be great to have all of them.
Yeah.
And technique is, after aggression, I would say technique would be what I would want you to have next. But understand, if I have technique but I don't have the physical capability to pull it off, well, then it did me no good.
Right.
So unfortunately, they all go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. We can't, if you want to have a holistic approach to fighting and self-defense, you can't just take one.
Okay.
You have to have the fitness side of it. You do want to develop strength. Doesn't mean you have to be a weightlifter, a big power, thing, but you have to have the strength to do the stuff that you need. Yeah. And the more strength that I have, the more options I have.
Yeah.
But technique is going to be important.
Okay.
But I say the biggest thing is that mental side.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess, I mean, you're right. People have gotten out of crazy situations before that haven't been in them before. I mean, you made me think of the guy that cut off his leg in the middle of the desert in Arizona. They did the whole documentary on him. Things that mentally people would never even think about doing. Yep. From clients that have certain backgrounds, say they have already done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or they've already had, or say they're a power lifter. Do you find that clients with certain types of backgrounds are more successful at Krav coming in than somebody off the street?
I don't know if successful is the word. They will pick it up faster.
Okay.
Now, like I did say, natural athleticism plays a big role.
Yeah.
So I have had clients that have trained for 10 years and you wouldn't be able to tell it. And clients that come in 3 months, they're surpassing. And, so it's not that, unfortunately, nothing in this world is equally distributed to everybody. Sure. We have great singers and then really bad singers. That's just how life is. So it doesn't mean that just because somebody has a background in something else, if they aren't athletic, then they won't pick it up necessarily faster. So I'm not saying just because if you have a background, you will automatically get it faster, right. But it does tend to. Okay. Because people that tend to gravitate towards sports or other physical activities tend to have more of a natural ability or a knack towards the physical, and so therefore they pick up stuff fast. Yeah. The nice thing is with Krav, we have to be jacks of all trade, which I know some people are very against. Yeah. But for us, we need to be really good at stand-up fighting. We need to be good at weapons fighting, and we need to be good at ground fighting. Yep. So somebody that comes in with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, it's amazing because they've already got one of the elements. Mm-hmm. Now, we often have to change a little bit of the mindset, but a lot of the technique is the same. Okay. And so backgrounds definitely help, and it definitely excels. For most people, excel the speed that they learn Krav. Okay. But Krav is meant to be a keep it simple system, and for you to pick it up quickly as much as you can. But yeah, backgrounds do help most of the time.
Gotcha. And what kind of advice would you give somebody, whether or not they have a Krav background, when they're coming up against a hostile situation? I've got in mind some advice I've heard from other people about this, particularly big guys. But what's the best piece of advice you can give somebody if they're entering or anticipating a hostile situation and start seeing something like that developing right in front of them?
If I don't have any skin in the game, leave.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't want to fight.
Yeah.
Even if you know how to do it, you don't want to. It's great because one of the things that really draws a lot of people to Krav is the gun disarms.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, oh yeah, the guns, or the knife disarms.
Yeah.
And what they don't understand is, yes, we train it, and you got to train it so that you have that muscle memory and you're not having to think about it. Yeah. But if you talk to any high-level Krav person, they're going to tell you, you point a gun at my head, and you're asking for something, I'm going to comply. Yeah. There's now, if you point a gun to my head and you say, I'm going to kill your family, well, now it's different. I'm willing to risk dying to save my family. Right. So then therefore I want to know the technique. So it's not saying don't learn techniques, but most robberies, let's be specific on this. Most robberies, the robber doesn't have the intent to kill you. Yeah. So if they pull a gun on you and you take off running, there's a good chance they're not going to shoot you. And that was way better than standing there and trying to do Krav. Yeah. So, and I shouldn't say that running isn't Krav, because that's like one of the first lessons is run. If you cannot be there, don't be there. Okay. Don't go to places that are going to put you in a bad circumstance. Yeah. And that's where a lot of people don't follow, because they want to live the life they want, and they put themselves in situations that they probably shouldn't. Yeah. But yeah, no, definitely. First advice, if you don't have any need to be there, don't be there.
Sure. I'm sure you'd say situational awareness too is probably
critical. You'd have to have had that to notice it.
Yeah.
So going with the premise that you had, that means you already had that part. Right. Now, when we talk about situational awareness, I think a lot of times we stop short. We don't really finish the conversation the way we should. Okay. Because we're always like, oh, well, keep your head up and don't look at a cell phone and pay attention to things. Mm-hmm. To me, that's very just observant. That's not actually finishing the task. For me, situational awareness means that not only do you have to see and take in information, but then you actually have to act on it. So that'd be the running, or just repositioning yourself. So often we see things and we put blinders on and we pretend we don't see it because we're trying to be PC, or we don't want to look goofy or embarrass ourselves, and then we walk into it even worse. But we were situationally aware because we saw something, but yet we never did the action side. Yeah. And again, I'm not meaning just fight. Like, there's a lot of things we can take steps towards before it becomes that. Right. So when we are looking more specifically at some techniques for situational awareness, things that we try to encourage people is that, one, I need to get the lay of the land, which does mean take your head out of the cell phone. Keep your head up when you can. Pay attention to group dynamics. What is the general feeling or vibe in here? What is the general people, like, what are people wearing? And then what your brain's going to start picking out is the abnormalities. And those are the things that are normally giving us clues to say, okay, that doesn't fit. Now, it doesn't mean I can punch the person, but it doesn't fit. So it makes me think, well, let me at least just pay attention to them while I keep talking and doing other stuff. And then I see a second thing that doesn't fit with that same person. Well, now you start saying, maybe I should encourage my group of friends to get up and walk outside. Maybe I should be bold enough to just not wait to see what's going to come, but rather go off of that, that's not a sixth sense, but off of those observations of saying, I'm uneasy with something I'm seeing, let's take some action towards it. Sure. But yeah.
Gotcha. How do you even, for folks that are pretty new at this, I know this seems to me to be a very difficult thing. Some people are really good at reading other people or reading a room, or they have natural self awareness and awareness of what's going on around them. Is there a way to develop those kinds of skills, particularly in group settings like you're talking about, and things people can do or observe?
Yeah, so most things we can train, right? Now, we may not be able to get as good as somebody else. Yeah. So we do see that a lot of people who have a troubled background, so meaning they were kids in an abused home, they're really good as adults to pick up cues that you and I, if assuming we weren't abused,
Right.
that we would never pick up on.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like somebody that's used to being around alcohol really quickly can pick out somebody who's drunk.
Yeah.
Or somebody who's used to being, right? So you get that. So there is life experiences that we can't necessarily, create for ourselves to learn those instinctual things that people are going to feel. So we may not be able to get as good as somebody that grew up in those specific environments.
Yep.
But things that we can do, one, it's like, if you want to learn to read, well, you got to start reading.
Mm-hmm.
So start actually paying attention to the things. And we don't want to be paranoid. So it's not trying to set up a way to make yourself more paranoid.
Right.
But next time you're, at a wedding, just look around and say, okay, well, what do I see that's normal right now?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, a bunch of happy people. And so you just practice like people watching, because as you watch people, then you start picking up more stuff. Mm-hmm. You can read books, you can do some seminars, things like that will definitely boost or make you do it faster. But first is just starting to observe. Some games that we use, for instance, just pick a color that day, and then try to just notice it throughout the day, and then dismiss it. So let's just say the color red. Well, as you're driving, oh, I saw a red car. Dismiss it. But try to have your brain picking out a specific thing, and that's just kind of like a mental exercise to help you become more observant. Now, not that red is an important color,
Right.
so it can be any color you want. But when we're talking about people, the two biggest places we want to look are going to be people's hands and their face. Those tell me a lot about what's going on. Not that I can read faces.
Sure.
But if let's just be very cliche. You're in a hoodie and you got a scowl on your face and your hands are hidden, I maybe need to be more worried about you than if you're in a tuxedo smiling and your hands are waving at me. Yeah. Right? So those are things that we want to look at. Hands once you start actually getting into a confrontation, let's say it's the guy's cussing you out or yelling at you, if his hand is still hidden, usually means there's something there.
Okay.
So we don't like hidden hands because it means weapons might come out.
Yes.
So we definitely want to track the hands and track the face.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I'm not an expert on facial expressions and reading body language type stuff.
Right.
But things that we can do is just practice figuring out what the norm is, because if I can figure out what the norm is in the scenario, then the outliers or the things that don't fit would stand out to me.
Yep.
But if I never practice that, then I won't do it.
That's fair.
I know hands too defensively are really important. So I was watching. Do you know Steven Crowder? Does that name ring a bell? He's a conservative commentator, and he does a lot of I change my mind things where he sets out a table.
Louder with Crowder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so he was sitting down, and he's had this happen a couple of times where people aggress him and get in his face. And one of the things he mentioned is he always keeps his hands real close to right up here where not only he can see him, but is also really close to his face to react. Is that something that you've also taught, positioning yourself during an encounter, and how to are hands defensively important from that standpoint? You could be by your sides, it doesn't really matter.
No, absolutely. So that's one of the first stances people learn is what we call semi-passive.
Okay.
And that's bringing your hands up.
Okay.
Now, it can look different ways.
Yeah.
Some people make it look like their arms are crossed, or they're doing the thinking man pose, or they're doing the let's not fight palms out type position.
That's exactly what he was doing. Yeah.
It's not anything new. It makes sense, right? The fastest way between 2 points is to get closer to it and then start. And so if somebody's going to swing at my face, which tends to be one of the more common things that they'll attack first, if your hand's already between them and your face, you're already halfway there to blocking it or being able to defend it.
Right.
We do the same thing with the bodyguards. So a lot of testing has been done to see, well, how can we react faster to a problem? And again, it's not rocket science, but they found, well, if I'm standing right on the person that I have to tackle, and my hands are already up, ready to touch him, and then you say go, I was faster than if my hands were in my pocket.
Right.
So definitely the hands up, important.
Gotcha.
Now, we want to do it in a way that doesn't look like we want to fight.
Yeah.
And so that can be hard to act, especially for most people. We don't like the limelight.
Yep.
And so oftentimes I find students act really awkward when they're trying to do like the semi-passive, let's not fight type demeanor.
Yeah.
But the idea is get the hands up there, but don't look like you're trying to incite something, but rather it's just there because of what was going on, and now it's ready.
I'm a big fitness equipment nerd, so when people are training for Krav in the off hours, are there certain things or pieces of gear? I see a lot of stuff around here that you'd recommend they use to, I don't know, whether it's increase their conditioning, increase their strength. There are certain body parts they want to focus on for Krav specifically.
So fighting in general is a very ballistic or dynamic thing.
Okay.
So I love kettlebells.
Yeah.
So if people can get good instruction on using the kettlebell so they don't hurt themselves, any of the big, our movement of functional fitness, all of that is relevant to the fighting.
Okay.
Now, unlike, let's say, powerlifting, we do have a cardio component that we have to have.
Yeah.
And it's not going to hurt our peak, weight lifting, because that's not our goal.
Mm-hmm.
So you do need the cardio as well built into it. And I think you can achieve a lot of that with the kettlebells. And that's just one example. I love my TRX bands for my shoulders. Mm-hmm. Slam balls and medicine balls, those all help a lot.
Yep.
Sledgehammers, tires.
Nice.
So pretty much any equipment that you could use for regular fitness people, we would love to have and use. But it does come down to trying to maximize and understand what am I working on that day.
Yeah.
Right? Because it'd be great if everybody did a lot of explosive work.
Yeah.
But not everybody has that much time in their day, and so they pick and choose whether they're coming to a fitness class or whether they're coming to the Krav class.
Sure.
The Krav classes have the fitness built in, but you aren't, being that it's a big class dynamic, you're not going to be using the power lift, like Olympic lifts and all that.
Right.
But yeah, no, anything that can help us to develop more functional speed and explosive power versus just strength, that's what we like.
Calisthenics being part of that as well? Okay.
Yep, and
Okay.
plyometrics.
Yep.
Definitely helpful.
Nice.
That's awesome. Where can people find Treadstone or reach out to you for classes, instruction, private classes, all that?
Yeah, so we are based here in Charlotte, and currently one location. So we are looking to open another one.
Awesome.
You can go to our website, treadstonetactics.com.
Okay.
And on there you'll find email, phone, all those kinds of things. But yeah, this is where we're at.
Gotcha.
And just to clarify, so you do Krav. What are the other training methods?
Yeah, so, well, as far as here, what we're offering at the school, we have the Krav Maga, we have the firearms training, and then we have fitness.
Okay.
Now, as far as the firearms training, again, I said it's called the dynamic engagements.
Yeah.
And it is a mixture of Krav with guns. And people often ask me, well, what do you learn in the class? It's far beyond what a normal gun class is. This is anything that's related to gun fighting, you're going to do in the class. So we do a lot of gun retention. You do a lot of, not that we're training to be SWAT members, but room clearing in the sense of I have to search my house for whatever reason.
Yes.
Or using structures and barriers, because most fights don't happen in a nice sterile environment, but rather an environment that has walls and buildings and cars and gas, pumps.
Right.
So learning how to use those kinds of things to your advantage. So those are our big ones.
Okay. Gotcha.
Out of wild curiosity, what you just said piqued my interest. Have you seen the training that Keanu Reeves did for John Wick?
Yeah.
Any of this stuff? Was he using a mix of Krav and defensive gun tactics as part of that, or was he doing something else?
No, he wasn't doing Krav.
Okay.
His trainers, I'm trying to remember what it was they did. I know there was a lot of jiu-jitsu,
Okay.
and then some other stuff. But if he has an amazing work ethic,
Yeah.
and the work that he did with Taryn Tactical, or Butler, I'm probably getting that name wrong. I think it's Taryn Butler.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, phenomenal shooter.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't go up against Keanu.
Yeah, no,
Not
that would
with
probably
shooting.
not end well. the amount of training and rigor you have to go through. I mean, because you're essentially taking years and years and condensing that down into whatever it was to prep for the movie, right?
Yeah, he did a good job.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the movie very unrealistic. The fighting style not all that great, but But his individual skill with shooting was amazing.
Gotcha. Nice. What do you, I want to talk a little bit more about that. Like when you watch these now that you've trained, I mean, do you see these fight scenes and go, this is complete garbage? I mean, are there any films that stand out to you as having some decent, fighting choreography?
I think we've gotten better.
Okay.
With most movies, we've gotten better than let's say the 80s. But one thing that people, I think people are understanding too, because there's now a lot of behind the scenes.
Yes.
So we're understanding more of the filmmaking. There's a lot of stuff, and unfortunately, we've come across this when we try to take pictures or film Krav techniques. It looks terrible. Oh. It's really hard to make it look good on camera.
Interesting.
And so this is where, even though you may have really great martial artists, giving like their advice on a movie. Yeah. Ultimately, it's, well, how do we get this to look good? Right. And so that's why they throw in a lot of stuff that, as a fighter, you're like, that is just nonsense.
Back kicks.
That would never work.
Yeah.
But it looks good. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's in there. And understanding that. It's just like, watching, a movie, let's say on like Special Forces, and you see their silhouettes. Well, they had to light it up so that you'd see them, because in real life, you shouldn't see them.
Right.
But then that would be a boring movie. It'd just be black, right?
Right.
Like, I don't see anything. What's going on? So there's a lot that in fight scenes and the choreography in movies, even if it's based off of a system, they had to modify stuff to try to make it look better on the camera.
Yep.
So, but I do think we are getting better at making things look a little more realistic.
Yeah. All the spinning around and inefficiency in the moves, I imagine, is probably not going to work in real life.
Some of it might. Who knows?
Hey, try one day.
Give it a shot.
Hey. See what happens. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, Jeremy. This is fascinating. And for everybody who wants to learn Krav locally, definitely check out Treadstone. Check out Jeremy's facility here in Charlotte. And we're going to do a gym tour here just real quick to see what he's got going on. But it's a really nice facility. He's got quite the fan club for what I can gather. So check him out in Charlotte. And we appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for listening. Please give FreedomCast a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. It would mean a lot to our business. Plus, it's fun to read y'all's reviews. See you next time.